You are all in for a treat. Actually, I should say y'all are in for a treat because I've got my friend. Sorry, did I do that right, Dave? I
You
tried
nailed
to
it.
do it.
That was
I nailed it. That's
perfect
beautiful.
usage of that. That's
My friend, Dave Sutton, who actually, all kidding aside, is one of the smartest and nicest people I have ever met on my YPO journey. Let me give you a little intro and then we'll dive into what we're going to talk about today. Welcome to Unmask the CEO Files. And we have Dave Sutton, who's a transformational marketer, investor, author, and board level advisor. So this is the reading stuff. Over 35 years helping companies grow and adapt. Look at how good he looks for 50. He's a member of the board of directors of Overdrive, a Boston-based digital marketing company, managing partner, which takes up a lot of his time at Blue Rhino Capital, which is a private equity group focused on high growth companies and transformational technologies. And of course, is a YPO board member. We're going to get into all those topics today. We're going to talk about leadership, marketing, investing, and wherever the heck we want to go, except we're not talking about the Atlanta Braves because they're doing too well. We're going to leave that alone, right? Dave? Dave,
right. Won't,
well,
I won't mention the Blue Jays.
please don't. But remember last year, this is where they were, and then that's when they came back. So all good.
That's true. That's
Still have hope.
there's always hope, but hope is not a strategy, right?
Well, we're going to talk a little bit about that today. So, Dave, welcome to Unmask the CEO Files.
Thank you, Alan. Great to be with you.
So what I want to do is just dive in typical YPO fashion because we call it unmasked for a reason. We want to get the stories behind the stories, not just the stuff that's in books. You are an author, of course, which we've seen before. But this question is, if you were really to know me, you'd need to know this. What would this be for you?
I love this question. It's the hidden self, right? Like
That's
what
right.
what's really driving you? I think if you really knew me, Alan, and your viewers, if they really knew me, they would know that inside I'm a recovering engineer. And you read some wonderful stuff about me that talks about marketing and creativity and investing and all kinds of attributes. But I started my career. I was an engineer. My first job out of school, I was doing problem solving.
Mm,
From an engineering perspective, and I think that all along the way, that's kind of informed the way I look at the world. At the center, I'm always kind of seeking the science first, and then that leads me to the art. But my DNA is really the heart of an engineer.
well, the one thing I forgot to say at the opening that when I was preparing for this podcast and I was on your LinkedIn profile probably would take us 40 minutes to go through and read. So that just says you like to do a lot of different things. Let me tell me why you'd like to do
Publishers
so many.
publishers have reached out to me, Alan, and asked for the publishing rights on my LinkedIn profile.
You maybe you'd be the first. You never know. But let's build on all kidding aside. My first question is really around why we're going to talk about marketing to start. Why you see marketing as a science rather than obviously it has the creative art side, but tell me about that. Does that come from your engineering mindset?
Yeah, I think it really comes. Yeah, it does come from that background, and maybe it comes primarily from a frustration. When I was early in my career, when I was leading business, kind of coming up through the ranks, I was always frustrated with the marketing department because they seemed to have their own rules, right? Like they had different measures. Instead of talking about ROI, they talked about gross rating points and um, impressions and these things that were invariably very hard to measure, and yet they were getting vast sums of money to invest. I would say they call it a spend, but it was an investment in growing the business. And I always wondered why marketing wasn't held to the same criteria. If we're going to buy a truck or build a factory, we need to build a business case for it. So why wouldn't, if I'm going to spend $4 million on a Super Bowl ad, I should be able to build a business case and demonstrate the ROI. And when I first got into marketing, that didn't exist. I mean, there
Hmm.
were very few heads of marketing. This is kind of the days before chief marketing officers. There were very few heads of
Hmm.
marketing that really had that analytic rigor and viewed themselves as making an investment as opposed to just spending money.
And how did you see that evolving? Because obviously things have changed dramatically since you you were involved in that world. What have people come to your side of the fence now, looking at
Oh
data?
yeah, I mean it started with the internet. I mean, if you
Yeah.
I can even go back to the date. I mean, it's like 1994, when all of a sudden the things that were so hard to measure became very measurable. When you're going through a digital or looking at marketing through a digital lens as
Hmm.
opposed to a traditional broadcast media lens, it became very easy all of a sudden. And for a lot of marketers, Alan, to be quite frank, it was an emperor has no clothes moment
Yeah.
as
Of
well,
course. Of course.
where all of a sudden these huge sums of money that had been going to print, broadcast, TV, radio, were basically being questioned on their efficacy, and certainly on the efficiency of using, scarce corporate resources to really pad the pockets of, these large media companies without having any real accountability.
And what kind of battles did you have even after you've got the latter half with Top Right? Were there still battles with your customers on how important data was, or they just liked to buy it that way because they had a 2% of their budget allocate to marketing they felt they should spend?
Yeah, I mean, there were always, I can tell you a lot of different stories where this manifested itself, but it comes down to this, right? Like if you really believe that marketing is an investment in growing the business, then you should be held accountable to the same types of measurement that
Yeah.
everybody else is held accountable to. So return on marketing investment is, I wrote about this in my very first book. It's no
Mm,
different than ROI, right?
yeah.
Now, if you want to make investments because they make you feel good, I had I won't name any brands, but I had a client early in my career that really loved tennis, and he
Mm,
wanted to invest a lot of money in sponsoring the US Open. And I was like, well, that's great. But, our truck drivers don't watch tennis. They don't go to tennis tournaments. And
yeah.
this is great. It makes you feel good. Don't call it marketing.
True.
Call it corporate hospitality, or call it something.
Hmm.
Put a different label on it. But if we're making the investment because we expect people to show up and be aware of our brand and buy our services as a result, well, then put some measures around it. But a lot of times I find there's, as you know, Alan, there's a lot of ego in big corporations and even small corporations. And a lot of times the investments are being made because the CEO loves tennis, or the CEO loves golf, or the CEO wants his buddies to see that he's got a Super Bowl ad.
Well, they're not spending their money, so I guess it's easy, right?
Yeah, well, it depends. I mean, sometimes if it's you and I both came through the YPO world, and
Yeah.
a lot of times it is family money. It's real money. It's not. But again, there's good reasons to make those types of investments if it is
Yeah.
something that you believe in. Like I'm a huge. I believe in philanthropy. I believe in giving money to charities that you really care about. But don't call that marketing either.
Good for you.
It's you
Yeah.
know.
You've defined it really, really well, but it's interesting that you're coming from the data side, but your business really turned out you had a playbook called the 3S playbook, right? So,
Yeah.
and the importance of story, strategy, and systems. Walk me through that because story is not data, but maybe there is a data play here. Maybe share a little bit about what you did in that world.
Yeah, I think story, and again, being in marketing long enough, and I know you come from the same world that I do. It's story. I always used to go back. I can't remember who the quote was from, but if you really want to motivate people, to change their behaviors, there's nothing better than a great story, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's one thing to give them a lot of functional benefits and facts and attributes, but fundamentally, people connect human to human around storytelling. And so, when we were developing the 3S playbook, we knew that everything would emanate from this idea of great storytelling is really what motivates and drives behavior, right?
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
if you take the time to do that right, and what I mean by doing that right is you do need the data to actually tap into understanding the customer that you're telling the story to, right?
Got it.
So I could tell, I mean, if you're in the market for widgets, I can tell you stories about, nails all day long, but you really want to hear widget stories, right? So if I don't take the time to understand who you are, what you think is important, what you feel is important in a business relationship, and what motivates you to go from purchase intent to purchase, if I don't take the time to understand that data flow, I don't care how good your story is. I used to joke with people, a lot of great marketers at one point in their career wanted to be Hollywood film directors and
Yeah.
producers, right?
Yeah.
Right?
Creative
Because,
side. Absolutely.
and that's great, and that's the
Yeah.
ultimate creative storytelling. But nobody goes to see, the latest Devil Wears Prada because they want to buy something. They go to be entertained.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
stories without strategy are entertainment, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Stories with strategy are marketing. And that was kind of our take on how, you need to have the strategic and business acumen and the data to back up why this story is relevant, timely, meaningful. And that does emanate from data ultimately. A lot of times it's market research that really is the what informs a great story.
Yeah. What's interesting is you actually just changed my thought process around data. Sometimes I thought data was more related, like digital marketing data, impressions and things of that nature, and reach and all that other stuff. But really, you've expanded it to information is almost a better. It's hard data plus information to inform an opinion. Would that be a better way to think about it for me?
Absolutely. I mean, we always used to joke about, you've got this, it's a continuum, really. You've got data, which, data itself can, when you add some meaning to it, it can become information.
Yeah.
When you add a little bit more of expertise to it, it can become an insight, right?
Yeah.
And then ultimately, what we were just talking about was getting someone to act. So
Correct.
there's this continuum from data to action. And marketers, the best marketers I've ever worked with, by the way, they can move freely between, data
Got
and
it.
then actually, driving purchase intent and getting somebody to do something differently.
But the dichotomy between how we started this conversation, the data scientists, which are marketing data scientists today, and the creative people, there's still a rift there, is there not?
I think there is, but I know you probably want to talk about artificial intelligence, AI, a little bit today. That's
Yeah.
collapsing. I
Yeah.
see AI because AI doesn't have a dog in the race, right?
True. True.
So AI is very representative of, I think, the way we all should be thinking about, the bridge between the science and the art.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter, right? Like it's
Doesn't
almost
matter.
it's almost theological. Like I'm going to be a data guy. I'm going to be a
Yeah.
creative gal. The customer doesn't care. You
No.
know, they want essentially that story that's going to really compel them to change their behavior, to buy something, to be an advocate or be a loyalist, whatever. And I think fundamentally AI is closing the gap between those two things because, Mid-Journey doesn't care what ChatGPT thinks, right? I mean, it's going to lead you down the path of what it believes to be the most compelling offer or advertisement
Interesting.
to win that customer's favor.
So while we're talking about AI and marketing, because there is a convergence of stuff, where do you think, and I'm not asking you to be a prognosticator, but maybe I am. Where do you see it going? Because it's kind of interesting and scary all at the same time.
I think we're kind of in the early days still, right? People, I mean, the one thing I will tell you, it reminds me a lot of the internet hype days, right? Like
Yeah.
there was a lot of, I mean, I lived through, and I know you did, Alan, as well. I lived through the whole, e-commerce is going to eat all the retailers, right?
True.
And to some extent, it did eat some retailers, right? But it also gave us an opportunity to rethink the way retail plays a role in how people make shopping decisions, right?
Yeah.
You may not buy at the Apple Store, but you certainly want to go experience the Apple Store and then go online and buy. So there was a lot of hype that, bricks and mortar was dead, everything was .com. I kind of feel it's similar to me today. And so my sense of urgency around AI kind of eating jobs and changing businesses and destroying industries, maybe just because I'm older, I'm a little more cautiously optimistic about that.
Yeah.
It is definitely changing the way people work.
Hmm.
And I think the other thing it's interesting, if you read any of the reports that are done by the big consulting firms these days, just like the internet, right? The early adopters are still not realizing the full value promise of AI. And I have a hypothesis on why that's happening. Because it's just like, when we went through the internet, re-engineering era,
Hmm.
people are doing what I call paving the cow paths. What I mean by that is the processes, the way we've always done things, they're trying to slap AI on it
Hmm.
and get value. And you can, right? You can write more quickly. I can generate more content. I can create better videos quickly. But the reality is, all I'm doing is I'm taking the same creative process and slapping technology on it.
Yeah.
And that will get me only so far. The people that has yet to really realize and I would say expose the opportunity with AI are those that are going to the blank sheet of paper and saying, why have we been doing it this way? We can skip all these intermediate steps
Yeah.
that were only there because we were operating with a set of constraints that AI has removed, right? And it goes back to my earlier point of, this collapsing between the data people and the creative people. There's no reason why there should be any kind of barriers there. It was always because of almost an ideological perspective, right?
Yeah.
Or an educational gap, like where we
Yeah.
would train people how to be great graphic designers, and we didn't bother teaching them about how to read a spreadsheet.
Yeah.
Doesn't make any sense, right? But AI doesn't care. You
Correct.
know, AI can be a whip smart CFO and a whip smart CMO in the same sentence, right? Same prompt. So to some extent, I think we're only seeing the beginning of the tip of the iceberg with AI. But I think you're going to see a lot of, like we did with .com, you're going to see a lot of losers in this
Hmm.
game
Hmm.
because there are certainly I will call it more mundane tasks, and I'm speaking now for the marketing world,
Yeah.
that absolutely have been or will be replaced,
Yeah.
right? Um, but the glass half full guy in me, and you know me, Alan. I mean, I'm always the optimist. I think the real win is going to be that it's going to take mundane tasks off people's plates and give them more time to be
Agreed.
closer to the client, more strategic and higher value adding roles and tasks. I think that's where the win is for everybody, but we're not there yet.
I think you're absolutely right. It is an opportunity to do more and do better. All the things that you couldn't get to, you now can get to because you got rid of the things that don't make sense. Even in my world, I find myself doing things that I know a machine can do faster, better, and more repetitively, and is never sick. And those things are going to be easy to transition, but the creative stuff and all the things you're wanting to do, that's really how we should be looking at AI. I mean, there's robotics and all the other things that are going to definitely kill jobs, but there's a whole, hey, I can do more now. Let's think of even healthcare. Healthcare is unlimited in terms of capacity. We can't just keep adding people.
Right.
Same
Right.
idea, right? Just we can treat more people now cheaper. That's a good thing.
Yes. Yeah.
I
And
love that.
that's also a good example where I don't think, I mean, there's also a human trust component in AI, which I mean, that's also been overhyped to some extent, but there
Yeah.
are certain sectors where, robotics, for example, has already had a massive impact. Like in healthcare, it's the one
Yeah.
that,
Yeah.
I've been doing some investing in like the agriculture market where there's a lot of menial labor jobs where
Hmm.
robotics just makes sense,
Hmm.
and artificial intelligence will replace people. But there are also a lot of high trust, high stakes types of environments where we will always, I think, as humans, want humans in the loop.
Yeah.
Like I love the fact that my doctor uses AI,
Yeah.
but if I ever go to my doctor's office and I'm talking to a kiosk, I will
Yeah.
be very upset.
That's right.
You know, um, but the fact that he uses, and
Yeah.
there's electronic medical records and he's using tools to diagnose issues, I love that, right? And I
Yeah.
love I love the fact that my doctor's younger than I am and he knows more about AI than I do. That's great.
Yeah.
But I don't ever envision that customer touch point being replaced by AI.
I think you're right. Even in the work that we do with Leadership Signal, that's kind of why we went down that road, is because at the end of the day, AI cannot have a heart. It can fake a heart, but it's
Right.
not going to have a heart. So it becomes a cognitive battle as opposed to a human battle. At the end of the day, that's what we are. You and I are humans, and we connect at a human level. They should be always, wrong terminology, but slaves to the servant in the way that we need them to do
Yes,
stuff for us, as opposed to equivalency, which would be pretty scary. Um,
exactly.
let's make a transition, kind of building off AI and the work you're doing in Blue Rhino Capital. So do you have a funny story about somebody that just decided to make cups and slap the AI term on it because that may sound sexy and might increase their valuation? Is that happening today? Is like everything is AI, my pen is AI, my dental is AI. Like what's happening in the investment world and how it ties
It's
to AI?
funny. it's so like serendipitous that you asked that question because I just came from a lunch with one of my portfolio companies that I invest in, and I won't name any names here because I don't want to call them out. But it was interesting because at one point in the conversation we were talking about how AI. He's a technology business and how AI is I'll say repositioning what he does. Right. I mean, he is using AI, so it's
Of
not like
course.
he's behind, but it's interesting that a lot of potential customers look at what he does, which is largely kind of an analytics oriented business, and think, well, I could just use AI to replace that. And so during the conversation, he said, well, I'm out there, I'm trying to buy a domain, a .ai domain, because if I have .ai instead of .com, that will signify that I'm an AI business, right?
Oh my God.
And I'm like, it's more than that, right? I mean, you're
Yeah.
actually using the technology, but people really don't care. It's not so much about the labels,
Yeah.
right? It's about how you show up and make them feel with regard to your technology.
Yeah.
And that's what's going to really change the end. It's the positioning. It's
I
not so
agree.
much the nuts and bolts of it. And so it's just funny story that kind of fits what your question was. But I'm seeing that a lot, like people just
Yeah.
trying to, AI inside everything that they're doing. And the reality is consumers are too smart, right? They're anything that comes across as inauthentic or not genuine is going to get kind of shellacked, I think. I mean, I don't think people will buy it.
I think, when I think back to our world when digital marketing started with social, and then eventually just became marketing, it's always been marketing. It just was another channel and another technology to access stuff. And AI is going to be, I think, similar. It's just going to be so ubiquitous that we can't say AI anything because everything's AI enabled somewhere, like an Intel Inside. AI is going to be behind or in front of most things we touch, I would think.
Yeah, a lot of times you won't even be aware of it, and that's okay, right?
That's okay.
Um, and it's the other thing, again, this kind of goes to the same point you just made a little bit earlier that everybody has it,
Yeah.
right? So anybody that's out there claiming that, I'm AI powered, that's kind of like I used to joke with people when I was doing CRM, customer relationship
Yeah.
management stuff.
Yeah.
Anybody can buy a box of CRM, right?
Yeah.
It's not the tool, it's what you do with it. And that's why I say that, the productivity thing, what we're seeing right now is very early days, even though
Yeah.
people, Gartner would say we're way up on the hype cycle right now. But I would argue that there's another cycle coming where people begin to see how they're transforming the business, not just automating or
Yeah.
paving the cow paths, as I said earlier.
Yeah. I'd be interested in your perspective on this as an investor and a marketer. So if we think about, there's four or five major companies, the LLMs and agentic AI that's coming. Um, when you're thinking about investing, the risk profile is higher than it's ever been with respect to that business can disappear with one upgrade of chat or one upgrade of Claude. How are you looking at the future? Because if you take a Canva, for example, which has been incredibly successful, they could literally disappear with one more upgrade. Like
Yeah.
how do you look at that as an investor and a marketer and an advisor to CEOs?
Yeah, it's a great question. It came up on another call I had actually last week, and
That
someone was
must be in
asking
your
me,
head, dude. I must be in your head.
yeah,
All these calls are
someone
coming
was
up.
asking me. So they didn't talk about Canva; they were talking about HubSpot
Yeah,
and
same. Yeah,
another CRM, and
yeah,
how literally people are writing uh, HubSpot equivalency using Claude right now,
yeah,
and just firing HubSpot. Um, it's a real risk. And as an
yeah.
investor, the way I would look at it, I look at it in kind of the same, to be honest with you, nothing's changed in terms of the investment mentality.
Got it.
It's does is there a core asset that is ownable? And what I mean by that is there a patent behind all this?
Got
Because
it.
AI will be subject to the same rules and laws as anything else, at least in the
Hmm.
US market. But if there's some IP that's protected, so what? Go ahead, use Claude to try to recreate it. I'll sue
Got it.
you, right? I
Got
mean,
it.
again, I'm
Yeah,
being
yeah,
hyperbolic, but
yeah,
if there's protected asset, that's one thing.
yeah.
The other thing that's interesting is there innate knowledge or expertise embedded in the app or the software. What I mean by that is there's a unique, think of it almost like a recipe, a unique
Hmm.
recipe,
Hmm.
how we manage the pipeline, let's say.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, Believe it or not, like it's really hard. The switching costs for a big organization that have invested a lot in Salesforce or whatever, the reason why they, don't leave Salesforce is not because something else isn't better. They've just invested so much in configuring it to their exact processes and their expertise, right? Is
Hmm.
embedded in so it's hard to unplug and plug in someplace else.
Got it.
So even if you have AI that comes in and rewrites all of your CRM, you may be able to renegotiate a deal with Salesforce, but a lot of the things you have to rebuild, it's expensive to do
Yeah.
even now. It's not just code, in other words. You're also having to rewrite and re-embed knowledge and expertise. So I think, enterprise software, there's a lot of hype right now around, Salesforce is getting clobbered, Oracle's getting clobbered, SAP is getting clobbered
Yeah.
because I can use Claude. It's a little bit of an overplay. Is it going to have an impact? Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I would also look at it from a install base versus new logo kind of
Mm.
conversation.
Hmm.
They're getting hurt on new logo. And
Yeah.
and I would argue that that's probably real. And
Yeah.
I wouldn't go invest in Canva. That probably would not those types of applications, probably not the best place from a long-term investment perspective. Um, yeah,
What's interesting is, you're talking about almost defensible positions, but it's so much more than the technology. When I think about those big enterprise software companies, they almost don't deserve all the success they've had in terms of
right.
the way they implemented and actually the technology itself. They just happen to have a position and they just did it. Like there's so many that are better but smaller. The big guys win because they have distribution. Like
Yeah.
so, but will the mighty fall at some point? If
I think it's interesting because I look at it through, and I know last time before this call, you and I talked, we were talking about some of the work that you're doing about kind of the invisible barrier. I want to,
yeah,
hopefully we'll
invisible
talk more about
variable.
that.
Yeah, you got it. Yeah,
That, you know, it applies not only individual executive levels, but companies as
oh
well,
yeah,
I think. And we never talked about this, but like I think about going back to my HubSpot example, HubSpot built up a lot of goodwill and then they started to lose it in the last 5 years because the perception is from their customers that they nickel and dime them. Like
yeah,
every time you want some little extra thing, it's
yeah,
another fee, another fee, another fee. And so they've got this bad rap that,
yeah,
as a result of the bad rap, people feel like it's an adversarial relationship, so screw them.
yeah,
You
yeah.
know,
True.
now, there are
Yeah,
other customers. I have customers, some of my former clients that just love their Salesforce rep and will die on the petard for their Salesforce rep, right? Because not because they love the product, but because they've gotten great relationship building, they've got great support. They feel like when they were in trouble, they bailed them
matter.
out, and that goodwill has value. And so, I'm not saying that's a competitive advantage or even a moat
Yeah,
for those companies, but it buys them time
yeah,
and time in the AI world may be the biggest asset that some of these large, I'll call them larger enterprise software companies have, to be able to pivot and really kind of maybe come up with some new way of doing the work where they are AI enabled but they still own a core asset, a database asset, for example,
yeah.
that really sustains the business for the long term. But it'll be interesting. I mean, I don't think all the enterprise software companies, we're not going to be looking back, you and I, in 10 years and saying, oh, that was the buggy whip era or something,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
I think they're going to be around. I just think that the ones that win will have rethought, kind of how they position themselves. As and software as a service in and of itself, that business model may go
Yeah.
away, maybe something different.
Yeah. It's interesting. And I think at the end of the day, no matter where this goes, it's going to make everybody better because you have to be better.
Yep, yep. And
Right.
it's going to also shine a light. I know you and we both have passions for like great creative people. If you're a great creative director, if you have a great creative eye, I think this only makes you better. I think it,
Yeah.
it amplifies that creativity. If you were a lousy creative director before, you're going to be out of a job.
Yeah.
You know,
100%.
Uh, but so it highlights expertise and it highlights people that have true talent. And
Yeah.
I'm not afraid of that. I mean, and I don't think people, if you aspire to be at your very best and be a very talented contributor, I think you should be excited because all this does is amplify what you're really good at.
I love that. So let's go to our last segment and talk about leadership. So you're advising CEOs in addition to your work in investment. What's the big hairy thing they're dealing with these days? What would be your thoughts on that, and what do you talk to them about?
I think there's several things I would have on that agenda, but probably the most common one right now is human capital. You know,
Hmm.
it's the how do I get not only attract great talent,
Yeah.
but retain that talent, motivate and develop that talent. I think CEOs, I don't care whether you're running, $1 million company or $1 billion company. I think that's a constant challenge. And then on the development side with those folks, it's how do you take someone who's got great, raw talent and really bring them focus and help them, to achieve great things in their career,
Hmm.
recognizing that sometimes that's not going to be in your company, it's going to be someplace else. I'm always amazed at how many people I run into that, either I worked with or they worked for me years and years ago, and they left our company and they went someplace else. And I hear stories all the time about, remember that one time we were on that client and you said this, or we worked on this together and that really was a turning point for me. I mean,
Yeah.
careers are boundaryless. And I
Yeah.
think part of the challenge that people that start to think about their human capital as, it's all in this one pen
Yeah. I
and
love it.
I can't let anybody leave the pen. They're
Yeah.
missing the point that, you know, just because they're good right now, this may not be the best fit for them long term. How do you manage it more like a professional sports team,
Yeah.
where you've got a manager and a coach that think about the long-term health of the system, which includes where that person goes. Maybe they become a customer, maybe they become a supplier.
Yeah.
There's all kinds of other ways of thinking about human capital beyond the bounds of what they're doing in your portfolio. And unfortunately, a lot of the leaders I work with, they're worried about their own portfolio, but they don't really care that much about, the individuals that make up that portfolio.
You know what's interesting about that comment, and I've often thought of it this way. Those folks go on to other businesses, sometimes in the same category. They
Yeah,
could be your biggest fan and be a client in the future. If you treated them with sincerity, as you said, that you're on my team and on my team as long as I can, and I'm going to do everything I can to make you feel good, you're going to leave feeling great. And those conversations that you just had about, you remember when we did this? That's
yeah,
real leadership, isn't it?
yeah, exactly. And I think it kind of goes to, I know some of the research and work that you're doing right now, I think leaders sometimes we get very wrapped up in what other people think about us, right? Or what other
Yeah.
people think about our companies.
Yeah.
But we don't really look at it through the lens of how do we make them feel or
Correct.
how do we, how do they, how was their experience and how do they tell others about the experience,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
100%.
And that's really, I mean, for most people, again, I'll speak for myself, but for most leaders, we're not trained for that, right? We're kind of trained to be confident and
Correct.
strategic and focused, and those are all very valuable leadership capabilities in and
Yeah.
of themselves. But if you're not thinking about like how you speak into a room full of peers or a room full of subordinates and how you're making them feel, how you're showing up,
Yeah.
I think you're kind of missing at least half the story, maybe more, right?
Well, what we found, and thank you for marketing on our behalf, Dave. Yeah, I really appreciate that. But all kidding aside, what we've learned in our work is that you can do all the right things and never land. And
Yeah,
so if you've got the deck, you've got the thing, you've done it, you've practiced with Lakita and all the great things, and then you don't land. And you go, what's missing? That's the part that's missing.
yeah,
And we can't name it. If you can't name it, you can't fix it. So that's kind of why it's and again, I wish I had this knowledge 20 years ago because there's a lot of mistakes I made, not recognizing that I wasn't coming across or I was over explaining or doing something that made the room not land. But it's a new technology, it's a new place, and I'm excited about that. But let's go on our last segment and talk about our friends and our life in YPO.
okay,
So, based on all that you've done in YPO, and on behalf of all of us, thank you for your service because I know all the work you've done. Is there a thread that when I use the word leadership, that you see good, bad, and ugly in what's happening, not in YPO, but with your exposure to YPOers. What are you seeing out there right now?
Um, well, on the good side, I mean, I still see, the fact that our mission in YPO has never really changed. It's always been about, building better leaders.
Yeah,
Um, there's a thirst for that more than ever,
good.
right? So that's the goodness is that I think, regardless of the generation, you and I are kind of Gen X boomer, whatever, wherever you want to park us, but I see it, I've got Gen Z kid and a Gen Y kid, and there's a continuity of
Yeah,
need, if you will, or a thirst for becoming a better leader and all that that means. That's good. I think that maybe some of our tools, I mean, YPO has been around since the 1950s, right? 1950. Some of our tools haven't kept up with the times,
yeah,
which may be an opportunity. Forum, I think, which for YPOers that listen to this know exactly what I mean when I say forum. Forum has kind of become the encapsulation of all things related to getting in touch with yourself as a leader, being vulnerable, understanding how you land in a room, what it means to, act under pressure versus,
yeah,
in a steady state, all that kind of good stuff. I think that tool hasn't been, I mean, it's been around 50 years, right?
yeah, yeah,
The form tools, and they've been tweaked, but around the edges only. So I do worry that we're not necessarily from an IP perspective, meeting the Gen Z where they are.
true.
And I see it with my own kids, Alan. I know with coming out of COVID, they had dramatic changes, probably larger than we even estimated at the time, in terms of the workplace environment. And I'm not just talking about work from home, in your pajamas
Yeah,
versus work in an office environment. Just the whole management
yeah,
process changed. And we all started using Zoom and other ways of communicating. And maybe we lost touch with some of the human and the emotional triggers associated with what it means to be an effective leader. And I worry about that generation because I don't think they're getting the same opportunities to fail that guys like
mm,
you and I had. I mean, every leadership lesson I ever, it was sourced off something stupid I did, right? That's kind of where the biggest ahas come from. Like, oh,
yeah,
don't do that again.
yeah.
Or by someone who was a leader, my leader, and I walked away going, I will never be like that,
Got it. Yeah,
Um, though, but again, I think from a YPO perspective, it's the organization is very healthy. It's growing. I think we're running into some headwinds by virtue of the fact we're so global,
mm,
and every market that we're in a different state of maturity,
yeah,
right? So stuff that worked, in the let's say the 1980s in the US, we had to pivot. We knew that. Well, some of those things actually still work in Africa, and we
yeah,
shouldn't run away from them, right? So there's that whole dynamic of the complexity of running a truly global footprint
yeah.
for leaders in very different markets around the world with different regulatory environments and different political overtones. I mean, it's complicated.
Absolutely complicated. And when you think about the best part of YPO, I was talking to a YPO earlier, and she said, "Oh, I've had a bad chapter experience, but I've had a great network experience." And I didn't go there, but I went, "So you just found a better way to connect with people."
Yeah,
That's why we have those different ways of connecting, because humans connect. They find peers and they connect. And and you do this I probably talk to a YPO or a new YPO every day. And when you have trust to start a conversation, isn't that, you don't have that in the rest of your life,
right.
but in YPO you do. And I've made mistakes where I trust a customer like it's a YPOer, and that slaps you in the face, doesn't it? Have you ever had that experience where you're,
I have. Yeah, I have. I mean, I think YPOers, by definition, we kind of go into YPO. We're very generous with our time. We're givers, right? I
yeah,
mean, the best YPOers I know are, guys like you and Rob Francis and other lifelong friends that I've made, right?
yeah,
Because we're generous and we're respectful but you get outside YPO, that's not the norm.
that's right.
And to your point, I'm actually I'm working on something too. At some point, I'm gonna turn the tables on you and it gets you to help me with some of my
100%.
IP that I'm working on.
Absolutely.
But I think YPO is in the trust business. You put
Yeah,
your finger right on it. we create that safe haven of trust. We get to trust very quickly, and we can leverage that within our network. Um, that said, when you look outside, I see trust fragmenting everywhere.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know,
I agree.
consumer trust, brand trust, regulators, politicians, platforms, digital marketing platforms. I don't know if I trust anymore. Am I
Yeah.
really getting, the media that I'm supposedly buying on Facebook? Am I really getting it? I mean, there's all these fractures
Yeah.
in the trust kind of ecosystem. And I worry about that. And maybe YPO, between you and I, maybe YPO has a place in trying to shift that dynamic because it is something I worry about, and AI is making it happen faster. Think about just authentic versus synthetic
Yeah.
content right now. Pictures that you see on Facebook or Instagram that are clearly fake,
Yeah.
but they're getting better and better and better to the point where maybe you won't be able to tell, and then what happens, right?
Well, I think you're right. I mean, we're all being manipulated to a certain degree if we want to really by the
Yeah,
system. And I don't want to over conspiracize it, but now, when I talk to my wife about things that oh, I saw this video. I said, start with it's not true and then work to verify that it is because
yeah,
the opposite is not true anymore. You can't, oh, but it was, no, 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 no. Anything can be fake now.
yeah,
Dave could be sitting in and talking to Trump and it's not Dave talking to Trump. So
yeah,
but that trust is broken forever.
right.
You can't
Yeah.
trust anything you literally see with your eyes and hear with your ears. You can't trust it anymore. That's kind of freaky.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you. And what it shines a light on too, and again, I don't want to get into the negative spin here, but we're not teaching kids to be critical thinkers.
That's
I
true
mean,
too.
when you and I came through school, I think there was a bias towards, you know, do the work, make up your own mind, right? Like
Yeah,
think it through, read the book. I mean, classic literature is a great example of this. Read it. What lessons are you taking away from this? I don't care what the cliff notes were, right? It's like, what does it mean to you, Alan, in your life, and how could you apply these lessons? How can you learn from the Merchant of Venice, what not to do, right? And I think we're losing that. I don't
yeah,
know
yeah,
where it started or why it's happening, but I think when you have people that don't have critical thinking skills, that it is easy to fall victim to sensationalism. And again, I think marketers, I think you and I have to take some of the blame for this because a lot of the algorithms and the systems, they
yeah,
reward outrage
yeah,
more than they
yeah,
do verification,
yeah.
right? So we get clickbait, we get more benefits out of getting the headline to make people go, oh my gosh. And then if you read the story, the headline had nothing to do with the story.
I
you
know,
know? But
I
it's
know.
that reward for outrage. It's that immediate gratification and the lack of critical thinking skills to ask, as you said, does this make sense?
Yeah,
Should I really believe this? Or let me go do some of my own research, and
yeah.
figure out whether or not that actually, is true. If we lose that, I'm actually really nervous because then the fractures of trust are I mean, they're gaps, big widening gaps that are going to be hard to close.
Well, if we just look at unfortunately the nature of the world today, that the trust gaps are fractured in ways that I don't think we've ever seen before and
Yeah.
hard to repair. And White Heel can be I mean, it's not the only beacon, but it can be a beacon at least of these are people generally with decent egos that have come together and said, we're going to do something for the culture of the organization. And everything at some point is a culture, whether it's a spirituality or a sports team or they're all just a combination of cultures. But what you're describing is the part that I'm most scared about, not the technology. It's
Yeah.
about another human trusting another human because there's only us right now
Right.
until the
Right.
aliens are proven to be here, which I understand they're close. They may be here. Maybe you're one. I don't even know. I think my wife is an alien, as a matter of fact. She doesn't listen to this podcast, so I'm safe. Anyways, uh, listen, my friend, any final parting words? This has been exactly what I would have hoped it to be, and I had very high expectations. So thank you. Any parting words before we wrap her up?
No, I've really enjoyed our conversation. I mean, I think I look forward to kind of seeing how you pull all this together. But I do think we went from the very high kind of esoteric and got into some very deep exploration around the concept of trust, which I think you could probably make a whole podcast series just about
You
that.
could. Well,
You
I'll
know?
tell you the secret, and everybody knows this. Nothing's going to be edited. We're going to start at the beginning and end when I go, we're done, and put a little branding around it, and we're done. We don't edit our podcast because we want it's unfiltered, right? And
Yeah.
unless you swore or did something silly or said the Blue Jays suck, I would never edit that out. They do suck right now, but that's another story.
Go Braves.
Go Blue Jays. I can't do no, I have to go Blue Jays.
No.
I don't know. Blue Jays. My brother, thank you so much for taking the time. I really appreciate it. You were awesome. And thank you for being a good friend and always being around when people need you. Thank you.
My pleasure. See you soon, Alan.